This video is not for you unless you are me from the future, and I finally got around to doing another video about the actual game, and this time trying to improve the assets that I've got for my 3D models. I kind of got myself a little bit sidetracked, going very much down the wrong path here. I spent a lot of time in the last video, I think, showing how the road layout was built and having the idea that the biker would go on a journey. That's not going to be the best way of doing it. I'm going to have a set of scenarios and a set of videos that work with it. Where I think it is right is trying to get a certain level of realism to the views, being able to look ahead, see around the bend, getting the lighting right, and also sorting out some of these textures. So getting a road texture and just tiling it, even if it's seamless, looks weird, but there is a nice plugin and it randomly rotates the tiles and it puts a kind of crinkly edge onto it. There is still a need to add some physical distortion and texture to it. And by doing that, I think I was able to get a good sense of detail up close and far away, and that gives a nice sense of depth. So I think in the final video rendered scenes, it should really, really help. But enough about roads. Let's have a look at the biker. Where are we going with that? So I used a method that was seen on YouTube, where you take the armature and you build the body onto it. And that's got a couple of really useful benefits. The first one is that you can get all of the joints in the right place. So in the past, I've made a nice kind of 3D model, and then I've tried to fit bones to it and fit joints to it and fit an armature to it, and it's never quite worked. But by doing it this way, everything is in the right place. You put on a mesh, delete half of it, put a mirror modifier on so that it's doing both sides at once. It does mean it's going to be symmetrical unless you apply the modifier and then change it afterwards, but I'm not worried in this case. And then just put the body on in the shape that you kind of want it. Put more detail around the joints, but it means you can get the joints in the right place, and the human armature is pretty good in terms of proportion, so I was fairly confident this was going to work. The body in this particular methodology is all made in one piece, and what I do separately is to try and do the crash helmet as a separate piece because that'll be rigid. But you can see here where I'm putting in extra detail, so where the toes are going to flex, I put in a whole load of loop cuts because I need to have just more geometry, more vertices there to be able to have the mesh move around it. Similarly for the knees, I'm putting in detail that I want, which will be some of the kind of armor and knee protectors, but I put in the extra geometry, and I have the extra nice kind of feature, and I can give it a little crinkly look, which is a good little visual representation of the fact that that's a joint. It's quite a fun process, but it took me a really, really long time. The crash helmet had a number of other challenges, and I still haven't been able to overcome one of them. That's where I wanted the visor to not just be a separate piece, which is fine, it's a matter of just taking part of it and duplicating it, but to also have that on a separate bone that could then move, so the visor could be either up or down. As it is, I haven't been able to do that. I'll be able to do it within the mesh, but not as part of the pose. But yeah, overall, I was pretty happy with it. It comes out as a fairly low poly figure, which is a useful thing because I've got to render this as video, so I need the minimum amount of geometry to give the look that I need. It comes out looking quite skinny, which I don't think is a particular problem, but it's probably not how most bikers actually look. But it should be posable. I haven't really played around with the poses. I know it can do it, but I haven't put the figure into biker poses. So yeah, that was quite fun. I was quite pleased by the look of it. The colouring I really enjoyed as well. So I was starting to think about where colours might go, how I was going to do it, and I'm not using mapping in this case, I'm just using different materials. So highlighting a set of planes and just coming up with a set of material properties for it. So again, that gives it a slightly cartoony kind of look, but it should make the rendering a lot simpler and a lot quicker. I'm not doing any real kind of distortion of the mesh. There might be some areas that are smooth shaded rather than flat shaded, but that's about it. When it came to the body, I tried to follow the kind of guidelines from the IAM, which is why I went for an orange tabard in the end. It would look a bit cooler not to have an orange tabard, but actually high-vis jackets are an advanced biker kind of recommendation, so I need to really reflect it in here. Similarly, with a white crash helmet, that kind of gets, that's a recommendation and is what I've chosen to use here. A nice little touch is obviously the computer can do the kind of shiny bits really, really nicely. To give it a little bit more detail, I've added in the front vent so that if for any reason there are any shots in the video that show the biker turning their head, it should be a bit easier to kind of see what they're doing. So that was the biker. The bike, when I came to do the bike, I stole the idea of getting the proportions right by building it on something. So I had a photograph of my own bike, used that as a plane, and yeah, just kind of built the mesh around that. So obviously the wheels, relatively straightforward. Again, the same thing, having a mirror modifier, so I'm only doing half of it and making sure it's got clipping on, so you're not accidentally duplicating stuff on the other side. The body of the bike was much, much more difficult to do. So this is actually my second time through doing the body of the bike. The first time I kind of started from the belly of the bike and went up, and it's just very hard to kind of control where the mesh goes. So this time I started at the tail and went forwards. The front of the bike has got a couple of aerodynamic panels on the front that I've done as separate panels. They're just kind of free floating. But actually, I think the overall final product looks good. It's not a duplicate of my bike, because my bike has single-sided swing arms, single-sided exhaust. So this is a version of a motorbike, but it certainly does look like one. It's got a sense of something that's real and weighty and that can quite happily move. So overall, I think compared to what I started with and the models I've ended up with, I'm pretty happy. They both look good, colorized, and I think that puts me in a really good place then to be able to start to think about the content of some of the video choices that the player will be making as they play through the game.